Thank you very much. Now, it will be a big challenge for me not to stumble on any of these chairs or tables, but I will do my best. Yesterday I was here and I felt a bit uncomfortable, I must say, because I know very little about cryptos and I just picked up a little bit about tokenization. But the one thing I know about in crypto is ecosystem. So that I can relate to. The other parts are difficult for me, I must say. But AI is easier, even though it's also very complicated. And I've been working at Philips for 13 years now in the area of innovation and especially in the areas where we cannot do it alone and there where we need ecosystem. That hence my title. So just to a refresher, what does Philips do? Basically, we do two things. We are in the medical world and we are still in personal care. And we're doing that to take care of more people. That's basically what we're in for. And we have been doing that for over 130 years, so it's an old company. But if you have lighting that says Philips, or if you have a TV that says Philips, or even audio equipment, yes, it was Philips, and there will most probably be Philips IP in there still, but it's now produced and developed by other companies. And that's basically where you see the continuous reinvention that happens at Philips. Every time there's a different way of looking at the economy and to see where we fit in. And you see here in this timeline that basically from being a lighting solo company, we've now almost gone medical solo. Lighting and medical are not that distinct as you might think, because a lot of the sources that we use to create the medical pictures with are still light. It's just a different wavelength. So Philips is already 100 years in the medical area. Just to give you a bit of where we earn our money from, it's diagnosis and treatment. It's the biggest part. It's about half. Then one third is in connected care. And then about 20% is in the personal health products. I've worked in all parts. The nice thing is I'm in a central role, so I get to work with all the businesses. I usually brag a little bit and say, okay, when it gets tricky, they come back to us, because the business should basically focus on making the sale of the next quarter and may not have to worry too much about a tricky project and putting too much resource on that. So that's also why we are organized in that way. Basically, there are three things that we focus on. And the nice thing with three things is you can remember them. Everyone can remember them. I think from 4 years old, you can remember three things. So that helps. So we look at artificial intelligence, we look at workflow, and we look at the product lifecycle. So those are the three areas that we as a central organization look at. When it gets clinical, it becomes the business units focused. Well, today is about AI. And I will focus in on that a little bit more. Basically, we see AI mostly in our products and services also, but mostly in our products, which is interesting because you see a lot of AI adoption today is much more about productivity and those kind of things, but we bring that productivity to our customers. That's basically what we do. We've started AI, we even redubbed it 10 years ago to ambient intelligence, already having that vision of general purpose technology that AI is becoming, that it would be anywhere where you would need it. It could be in an avatar or it could be anywhere, but wherever you would be, the intelligence would be with you. And that was what we meant in ambient intelligence. Of course, the industry term prevailed, and that's typically what you get in the traditional industry. Sometimes you think you have the perfect term, but of course the initial term was already there. I just heard 70 years, I believe. The first time I got into AI was, I think, early in the 1990s when I did a subject in university on neural networks. So I know a little bit about how AI learns, but I'm not now much more into the business application of it. Just given some examples. If you're in healthcare, one of the problems is people. People is not the people that are sick. Happy to help those, of course, and AI can help, hopefully also break that. I heard something about medication, but even preventative care might not even need any any medication at all. If we just make sure that the AI generation is more healthy than the previous one, we can probably break the cycle that we get into older, but unfortunately also sicker population. So also in healthcare, it's very difficult to find the right people. And if you find them, they usually rove around. So you have to educate them every time. And our equipment is not simple. So before you can work with an ultrasound or an MR or whatever, you need the proper education. What we saw from the data is that people start with the education but really don't move on. So they do 1, maybe 2 learnings, and that's about all they do. Because they are not activated to do more, basically. They get access to maybe 40 trainings, but once they've completed the training, yeah, there's nothing happening there. So we came up with a recommendation engine for it, and also a large language model, so you can actually get a good conversation with, okay, which training should I take next, or hey, this is interesting. New data from that proof of concept that we did showed us that our learning is far too big. Most of the people want to learn on the spot, not new to you, but still new to the people that develop learning at Philips, I would say. And they say, yeah, but I have a certain procedure in 10 minutes that I don't do every day. So I'd like to just roll back to that. Another example where AI can really help you. And you can have that conversation. You can really tell it, I have that procedure coming. Which training should I take to refresh? That's great. Other examples, the newly released shaver that actually helps you shave best in the shortest possible time with AI. Then already for a longer time we've been analyzing images, of course, and there are millions and millions of images. I think it would be interesting if we could tokenize images so you know what has happened to it. But I'm not an expert in that area, like I said, but it's an interesting thing I learned over the past 2 days. And we see more and more AI really coming into the surgical field. We do minimal invasive procedures, so catheters that go in, basically still in your veins, but we're also experimenting with lungs, for instance. There you really need to know how to navigate. Yeah, and where do we use, to navigate, we also use all kinds of AI. So there's a lot to be done, but it's to drive customer value. And that's interesting. So we have the developers, and there's about 14,000 of them at Philips. About half of them are working in data, AI, and software. So these are the people that run away with AI. And then come the people like me that are interested, have a business background, but I see the value and we create new value propositions. But the rest of our organization is basically not on that same path. Even sometimes I find it difficult to explain what the value is to the customer when AI comes in. So there's a lot to be done in educating the workforce. Then on the part of ecosystems, one of the things we've learned with AI, we can do whatever we want on AI, but there will be about 100 times more development outside of Philips than inside. And that might be 1,000 times, but then we just have seen the tip of the iceberg. So you need to partner in AI. We found that very early on in the analytics of the images, because we would have developed maybe 40 different applications, and then we would test them in the market, and maybe 8 of them were used and 3 frequently. And then you say, okay, but why did we develop all those others? Because it's quite expensive to develop those. However, if you leave that to the ecosystem, and that we did for the second step, then it's a choice of thousands of algorithms that you have. And it's basically enabling the customer, hospital in this sense, to actually make that choice. So we built with a partner a store. There's 150 different AI analytic tools there that are very specific. Some of them may only be used maybe 100 times per month, some of them 10,000 times per month. But also for small companies, 100 times per month is a perfectly okay business model. Not for Philips, but for the small companies, it is. And we don't have to do the development, so we can deploy right away. So it's just a matter of making that available. Looking at the time, oh, we're doing fine. Maybe one other thing. The way we move around in ecosystems is we start with the innovation ecosystem. So a lot of people that I heard talk about ecosystems usually talk about established ecosystems. In the field that we are in, those ecosystems are not that established yet. So you first need to find the partners with whom you can make a proposition that really works. With those partners, you go to market, and we call that the minimal viable ecosystem. And if you've done it well, it will attract more partners. So that ecosystem starts to gain traction. It's still in the value creation part of the circle. And sometimes you need to go back to the innovation ecosystem because sometimes they don't work together that well, or they don't scale, or something else is there. Once you get into the business ecosystem, it becomes more interesting. We've had a couple of good examples, interestingly in Brazil, where we have an alternative for basically your administration around the imaging. That's a lot cheaper than the standard systems that you can use. And there's just an explosion of companies that wants to work with us. There's, I think, now 180 companies that provide services based on the infrastructure that we deliver. And that has enabled us to move into a platform ecosystem. And a platform ecosystem has the interesting part that you can monetize on two sides. You can monetize on the customer side, but you can also monetize on the delivery side. You have to do that ethically, so don't charge twice for one service. But for instance, if people want to integrate with our platform, they pay a fee on that. And if we provide access to their application, also there's a small fee included. So that also makes it easier to get the ecosystem running. I put it in a circle because, yeah, then you get tons and tons of new insights if you at least look at the data well, and then you see new opportunities for innovation. So it's not one circle, it's a circle in a circle in a circle, basically. How do we start? And that's always tricky, because the budget question always comes up really easily. But I've heard it already today and yesterday a couple of times. Start small. Start with something that you can do with a couple of people. The education example I gave, we did with 2 students. Just 2 AI master students. One built a recommendation engine, the other the LLM. And that was it. That was the only thing that we needed. The rest we did literally by hand. Didn't matter for the proof of concept. It does matter for scaling. Now we're using AI to automate the steps so we can scale. But basically, it starts always with a business problem. At least if I have to work on it, there must be a business problem. Even though I'm very interested in new technology, the technology itself will not solve a business problem. I need to find a business problem to find out, okay, what am I looking for and how can I really address this? And then you look at, okay, can I get some traction internally and externally? Internally, usually more difficult than externally, also traditional industry, so a lot of levels and not everyone willing to take the same risk. But eventually, if you can talk about your ROI, and in this case we call it RODI, you would talk about, okay, we're going to invest a little bit, and then, what could it open up? And that's a very important step. So it's not a business case yet, but it's a first view of what a potential future could look like. Then already we start looking for partners. Not always needed, but if there's a partner out there, that's also a reason for me to be at these kind of conferences. You meet people that you otherwise would not have met. And there might be a solution there that I did not see. We do a lot of scouting and stuff, but still. And usually it's more serendipity than scouting that brings the right partner in, I would say. And then we move through and really go for that proof of concept. We try to prevent using the word pilot, because at a certain point in time we had a senior manager and says, we have more pilots at Philips than at KLM. So we don't need pilots, we need proof of concept. If we have proof of concept, we can move on. And then it really becomes a project. So then you start looking at the business model, you start looking at the business case, and you start asking for funding. My personal take on this is always anything under 200K you should not have to really build a business case for, because you're still in the exploratory stage. But once you really move into the larger investments, then of course you should make sure that it's properly covered. It's still a discussion with especially finance somehow, that 200K is not just lying around, so there should be good reasons to do so. But that's the methodology that we've applied that seems to work, at least has worked over a number of times. But we're not there yet. We're looking much more for the feedback of our customers. Again, this presentation mostly focused on healthcare, because 80% of our business is there. Because if we have long-term strategic partnerships and partners that really want to move on with us and also explore, then it becomes very interesting. We do that also in the CO2 reduction, for instance, where we say, okay, we can reduce 20% by replacing old equipment by new equipment and doing our services in a different way, but we can commit to reducing 50%, and we'll find out in the next 5 years how we do. That's what those large-scale partnerships entail. And that's really interesting, because then you start co-innovating and you have access to a lot more data. Hey, if you get a large hospital in, they will share a lot of the data that they have, and we can do a lot more analysis. Very interesting. Open platforms. Yeah, we first maybe made a step too far there. We tried to become our own platform. Now we're partnering with larger platforms like AWS for cloud services, but we've learned at least how to make that accessible and safe for medical data. And like I said, the ecosystems play a larger and larger role. What is interesting, we first had a central ecosystems team. Then we decentralized, so every business kind of needed to find that out. Now they're kind of there. And the kind of questions we get in the central team therefore start also to now know a little bit about what an ecosystem is. Can you help us grow it, or can you help us set up a new one? So those are interesting questions to address. Already put in this message, but I want to reiterate that the minimal viable ecosystem is the key part to be successful. Because if you don't have that, if you start too early and you're out testing your offering rather than your ecosystem, then you might fail, because you're testing two things at the same time and you never know what is really working. Like I said, these ecosystems that we have, they have many shapes or forms. The applications that I talked about in the AI sphere are in the AI manager that you can see here. But we also are participating in ecosystems with AlgoDX, for instance, where our direct competitors are also in. So it's also coming to a standard in the industry where you make sure that for a hospital, it should not matter whether they have a mixed portfolio of equipment or pure one play. They can still access the AI that's available there, and that really helps them in addressing that productivity issue, shortage of staff, and trying to get healthcare in a state where it's earlier in detection and preferably even in prevention. I think this is the last one. What we have seen is kind of ecosystem is kind of the end of a maturity scale. There will probably be more steps after this, but we haven't discovered them yet. What we started doing first is make our products smarter, having connected them, and eventually you say, okay, when you have done all those steps, then ecosystems can come into play and you can actually apply AI at scale, which is the only way to be successful with it. And that's blinking, so that was my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was
my pleasure.
It was actually inspiring. I didn't know Philips was active in that sort of ecosystem building. That was very cool. Thank you very much. And for all of you courageous people who made it well into the lunch break and to remain here to listen to Rob, thank you very much as well. I'll see you back at, I think, 1:30. and now have a well-deserved lunch, stretch a little bit, and we'll be back on schedule after the lunch break. See you in a bit.
Thank you.